What if I told you that after Moses' death, something happened behind the scenes of the spiritual world that almost no one talks about? A secret, intense battle where Satan himself tried to take possession of Moses' body. Yes, the devil in person. But why? What did he want with it? And more importantly, why did the Archangel Michael have to intervene directly? This story is one of the most intriguing in the Bible, and I guarantee you, you will never see Moses the same way again after this. Now, imagine the scene: the great leader of Israel, the one who parted the Red Sea, defied Pharaoh, and received the 10 Commandments directly from God, dead. His lifeless body lying there. But while men saw only a departed leader, in the spiritual realm, an explosive battle was taking place. On one side, Michael, the celestial warrior. On the other, Satan, the deceiver. What was at stake? Just a lifeless body? Or something much greater? Satan never acts without reason. He does not fight for something that has no value. If he wanted Moses' body, there was a strategic purpose behind it. And here's the question that makes you think: what if he had succeeded? Would Israel have turned Moses into an idol? Would God's plan for humanity have taken a different course? This makes us reflect on something profound: how often are invisible spiritual forces acting around us without us realizing it? Have you ever felt like you were in an invisible war? That there are moments in your life when everything seems difficult, as if something is fighting against you? This passage teaches us that there are battles happening behind the scenes that we don't always see, but that directly affect our reality. If even Moses, a man chosen by God, had his body contested, imagine you. What makes you think that nothing is trying to divert your destiny? Now, back to the mystery. God decided to bury Moses in a secret place. But why? Why not allow the people to know where he was buried? The answer might lie exactly in Satan's strategy. He knew Moses was a powerful symbol, a leader who had freed an entire people from slavery. The devil could have turned that into a point of idolatry, a place of improper worship, or even used it to bring accusations against Moses and tarnish his legacy. And here's a shocking detail: Satan is an accuser. He always tries to remind us of our mistakes, our failures, our past. Moses was not perfect. He made mistakes. He was impulsive, doubted God, and because of one mistake, he was not allowed to enter the promised land. Now, think about this: if the devil had the audacity to dispute the body of Moses, one of the greatest leaders in history, what stops him from trying to do the same with you? From trying to steal your peace, your faith, your purpose. But Michael teaches us something powerful. He didn't waste time arguing with Satan. He didn't engage in debates. He simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." And that was it. Simple as that. This shows us that true authority does not lie in us, but in God. When you find yourself in a spiritual battle, you don't need to argue, justify, or try to fight in your own strength. You just need to be aligned with God and let Him fight for you. But wait, there's something even more impressive about all this. Something that connects Moses directly to one of the most impactful moments in the New Testament. What happened to him after death? Was this really the end of Moses' story? Or did God have a much greater plan for him? Because, my friend, this dispute over his body was just the beginning. Moses spent 40 years in Egypt, then 40 years in the desert, and when he was finally just one step away from the promised land, he was barred. The greatest leader in Israel's history, the man who spoke to God face to face, who parted the Red Sea, who defied Pharaoh, was not allowed to enter the land he dedicated his entire life to reaching. Now tell me, does that seem fair to you? If it were any other man, maybe it wouldn't matter as much. But we're talking about Moses. The one who carried the weight of an entire nation's liberation on his shoulders. The one who witnessed miracles no one else had ever seen. How could someone like that lose his reward for a single mistake? Now, get this, Moses was born with a death sentence. Pharaoh's decree declared that every Hebrew boy should be killed. He wasn't even supposed to have survived. But God had a plan. The condemned baby ended up inside the enemy's palace. He grew up in luxury, received an Egyptian education, lived as a prince, until he discovered who he really was. And when he understood it, he made a decision that changed his life forever. Moses could have stayed in the comfort of the palace. But he chose the desert. And here's the question you need to answer now: do you have the courage to leave comfort for purpose? Or will you remain complacent, living a mediocre life, afraid to step out of your comfort zone? Because Moses had the chance to live in Egypt as a king, but he preferred to live in the desert as a servant. And then, his great mission began. Moses faced Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth, with nothing but a staff in his hand. Egypt trembled. The Nile River turned to blood. Locusts devastated the land. Death knocked on the doors of the firstborn. And then, the impossible happened: the Red Sea parted. The people crossed. Egypt was destroyed. Moses was now a living legend. But do you know what his mistake was? He thought Pharaoh was the greatest enemy. He wasn't. The real challenge came after. Because freeing a people is one thing. Teaching them to live in freedom is something entirely different. And Moses had to endure 40 years of complaints, disobedience, idolatry, and betrayal. And when the long-awaited moment finally came, Moses failed. One mistake. Just one mistake. After everything he had lived through, after everything he had done, he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. Seems like an insignificant detail, right? But do you know what was at stake? The glory of God. Moses, in a moment of anger, took credit for something that belonged to God. And because of that, he was barred from the promised land. Now, look at this: Moses died in the desert. But did his story really end there? Did one mistake truly erase everything he had done? Or did God still have a greater plan for him, a plan that extended beyond death? Because there's something no one realizes. Something shocking. Something that connects Moses directly to the future, and you won't believe what happens next. Now, listen carefully. Moses died. But what happened afterward will leave you speechless. The greatest leader in Israel's history, the man who confronted Pharaoh, who parted the Red Sea, who spoke with God face to face, was simply gone. No one ever found his tomb. No grave. No trace. Nothing. Do you know why? Because God himself buried him. Now tell me, why did God hide Moses' body? What was he trying to prevent? This was no ordinary burial. There was no ceremony, no mourning, not even a marked grave. God hid Moses' body in a place no one has ever discovered. Now, think with me, why would God do this to such an important man? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and even Joseph had honorable graves. But Moses was buried in secret. Doesn't that seem strange to you? Now, one thing is certain: if Moses' tomb were known, it would have become a place of enthusiasm. The Israelites had a terrible habit of turning leaders into idols. And God would not allow Moses, even after his death, to become an obstacle to true faith. But there is something even more frightening about this story. Because it wasn't just God who cared about Moses' body. Satan wanted it too. Now tell me, why? The devil doesn't fight for something that has no value. So, what was so important about Moses, even after his death, that made hell itself rise up to dispute his body? And here's the detail that almost no one notices: this was not just a burial issue. This was a spiritual battle. On one side, Michael, the warrior archangel. On the other, Satan, the accuser. The two battling over Moses' body. Have you ever stopped to think about the gravity of this? What was at stake here? Moses' destiny? The future of Israel? Or was there something even deeper going on behind the scenes? And here's a question that won't go away: if even Moses had his body contested in the spiritual realm, do you really think your life isn't caught in an invisible battle? If the devil fought over Moses, what do you think he's trying to steal from you? Now pay attention, because this dispute over Moses' body wasn't just a celestial clash. It was a strategic move. And when you understand what was really behind it, you'll realize that this story is far from just being about a secret burial. This will blow your mind. Moses died. But what happened next was simply insane. There was a spiritual battle over his body. Satan wanted to take it. Now tell me, why? Since when does the devil care about a lifeless body? What was at stake here? You need to understand something. Satan never acts without strategy. He doesn't fight for something worthless. If he tried to take Moses' body, he knew he could use it in some way. And now I'm going to show you the damned reasons why he wanted to seize that body, and when you understand this, your perspective on this story will change forever. The devil sensed that Moses' mission wasn't over yet. He may not see the future, but he knows when God is about to do something great. And Moses was too great to simply disappear. What would happen after his death that Satan wanted to prevent? What was he so afraid of? Now I'll answer. How many times did Israel fall into idolatry? How many times did they turn objects and people into false gods? If Moses' body had been found, the people would have turned it into a shrine, a sacred tomb, a new golden calf. And Satan knew this would be a devastating blow. If the people started worshipping Moses, they would forget God. Do you remember? Moses killed a man in Egypt. He disobeyed God by striking the rock. He had flaws. And who is the greatest accuser in history? Satan. He could have lifted Moses' body and said, "Is this God's great leader? A murderer? A rebel? A sinner?" How many times does the devil do this to us? Reminding you of your mistakes so you doubt your purpose. The devil has always wanted to pervert God's plans. He tried to destroy Adam and Eve in Eden. He tried to stop Jesus coming. And now, he wanted to use Moses to ridicule God. To turn him into a tainted symbol. The devil wanted to steal God's glory and use it for himself. Now, get this, because here comes the most shocking question of all: what if Moses' death wasn't the end? What if God had such a great plan for him that not even death could interrupt it? Because there's something here that no one notices. Something that connects Moses to one of the most impactful moments in the New Testament. And when you discover this, you'll understand why Satan fought so hard for his body. Moses' body was there. Lifeless. Motionless. Just a body, or was it? Because, in the spiritual world, hell itself had its eyes on it. And when Satan appeared to claim it, it was the Archangel Michael himself who came down to face him. Now think about this: why was Michael sent? Wasn't any angel enough? Why was this dispute so intense that one of heaven's most powerful warriors had to intervene? What was at stake? This wasn't just a conversation. It was a battle of authority. The devil wanted to take possession of Moses' body. But Michael didn't let him. And the most shocking detail: he didn't need to fight. He didn't need to argue. He simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." Now tell me, if even an archangel didn't waste time debating with the devil, why do you still insist on arguing with his attacks? Many people try to win their battles through sheer force, shouting, and arguments. But Michael teaches us something that few understand: power isn't in who shouts the loudest but in who knows whom they trust. Michael didn't use his own strength. He didn't say, "I rebuke you." He declared God's authority. And at that very moment, Satan had to retreat. What if this is happening in your life right now? How many times does the devil try to steal your peace? Your faith? Your purpose? Do you argue with him? Do you try to resist alone? Or do you do as Michael did and declare that the authority belongs to God? But hold on. Because the mystery doesn't end here. Do you think this story ends with Moses' body being buried? Think again. Because God's plan for Moses did not end in death. And when you discover where Moses appeared after he died, you will understand why hell tried so hard to prevent it. Moses died. God himself buried him. Satan tried to take possession of his body. But what no one expected happened. Moses came back. Moses reappeared centuries later, alive, at the transfiguration of Jesus. And if that doesn't make you question everything you thought you knew about this story, you haven't grasped the depth of the mystery behind it. Now answer me, how does someone who died in the wilderness and never entered the promised land appear, centuries later, in the promised land, beside the Son of God? What does this mean? It means that God's plan for Moses never ended. Satan thought he could close his story. But God was saying, you do not decide the destiny of my chosen ones. Now everything makes sense. The devil tried to take Moses' body because he knew he still had a role in the future. Tried to erase Moses from history. But God had already determined that he would be there, beside Jesus, at the moment of the transfiguration. What was Moses doing there? On the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus appeared in glory, and beside him were Moses and Elijah. But why? What does this mean? Here's a detail that few people notice. Moses represented the law. Elijah represented the prophets. And now, standing before them, was Jesus, the fulfillment of everything. The devil thought he had defeated Moses in the wilderness. But centuries later, Moses was alive, glorified, standing beside God himself in the flesh. What seemed like an end was, in fact, a new beginning. What if this applies to your life? How many times have you thought you already lost? That it was too late? That you failed so much there's no turning back? Moses seemed to have lost everything. But in the end, God took him to the place he had promised. What if what you think you lost is just a preparation for something even greater? But wait, because this isn't over yet. There is a message behind this story that is much deeper than it seems. And when you understand what it reveals about God's final plan, you will see your own life in a totally different way. Moses' story was not just about miracles, battles, and a final mystery. It carries deep spiritual truths that can completely transform the way you see your life, your purpose, and your relationship with God. Satan wanted Moses' body to turn him into an idol. And how many times do we do the same? How many times do we place people, objects, or even our dreams above God? What are you idolizing without realizing it? Moses made a mistake. One mistake and he lost the promised land on earth. But in the end, God took him there anyway. How many times have you thought you failed so much that you no longer deserve God's promise? But God always has a way you don't expect. If even Moses had his body disputed by the devil, what makes you think your life is exempt from this battle? The enemy tries to steal from you every day. Your faith, your peace, your purpose. The question is, are you ready to resist? Satan tried to take Moses' body. But he failed. He tried to stop him from reaching the promised land. But he lost. And how many times do you feel like the enemy is trying to stop you? In the end, the final word belongs to God. Now tell me, will you embrace this revelation or ignore it? You have two choices right now: live as if this message wasn't meant for you, or realize that God is speaking something powerful to your life today. And if you want to keep discovering the hidden secrets of the Bible, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. Because this is just the beginning.